The SS Odyssey descended through the thick atmosphere of Zoreth 7, its engines humming softly as the ship prepared for landing. The planet below was a mix of vibrant greens and deep blues, dotted with strange rock formations that jutted out like broken teeth. Captain Liam Carter sat in the pilot's seat, his hand steady on the controls. Beside him, Megan Doyle, the team's biologist, leaned forward, her eyes wide with excitement as she took in the alien landscape. "Looks like we hit the jackpot," Noah Hart, the engineer, said from the back of the cockpit. His voice carried a hint of sarcasm, but there was no mistaking the curiosity in his tone. He adjusted his tool belt, ready to jump into action once they touched down. Rachel Blake, the communications officer, didn't respond. She was too busy scanning the area for signs of intelligent life. Her fingers danced across the console, adjusting frequencies and filters. "No signals yet," she reported after a moment. "But that doesn't mean anything. This place is so alive." Liam nodded, his focus still on the controls. "Alive or not, let's stick to the plan. Set up camp, gather samples, and avoid trouble." The ship landed near a crystal-clear lake surrounded by towering trees with leaves that shimmered faintly in the sunlight. As the crew stepped onto the soft, mossy ground, they were struck by how quiet it was. There were no birds chirping, no rustling of small animals, just an eerie stillness that made them all uneasy. Megan was the first to break the silence. "This is incredible," she whispered, kneeling down to examine the moss. "It's almost like the plants are breathing." She pressed her hand against the ground and felt a faint vibration, as if the earth itself had a heartbeat. Noah rolled his eyes but couldn't hide his grin. "Breathing plants. Next thing you'll tell us is that the rocks talk." "Don't tempt fate," Rachel muttered, glancing nervously at the dark forest surrounding them. "We don't know what's out here." As they began setting up camp, Liam noticed something unusual: a series of deep gouges in the dirt near the edge of the lake. Each mark was several feet long and looked like it had been made by something massive with sharp claws. He knelt beside the marks, running his fingers over the grooves. "Whatever made these isn't small," he said, standing up, "and it's probably still around." Megan joined him, her scientific curiosity overriding her fear. "Could be a predator. Apex, maybe. If we're lucky, we might get to study it." "Lucky?" Noah raised an eyebrow. "You do realize predators eat people, right?" Before Megan could reply, Rachel called out from where she was unpacking equipment. "Guys, come look at this." She pointed to a nearby tree trunk, where 3 long scratches ran vertically up the bark. Beneath them lay a pile of bones, picked clean and bleached white by time. Liam frowned. "Looks like dinner leftovers." "That's not all," Megan said, crouching beside the bones. She picked up a fragment and turned it over in her hands. "These aren't from any animal I've seen before. They're too big, and the structure is off." The discovery sent a chill through the group. For the first time since landing, they felt truly vulnerable. The beauty of the planet now seemed less inviting and more sinister, like a trap waiting to spring shut. That night, as they huddled around a small fire, the silence returned. It wasn't peaceful. It was oppressive, heavy with the weight of unseen eyes watching from the shadows. Every snap of a twig or rustle of leaves made them jump. Even Noah, usually the most laid-back member of the team, stayed close to the fire, his usual jokes replaced by wary glances into the darkness. Just as sleep began to claim them, a low rumble echoed through the air. It was distant but unmistakable, a deep, guttural growl that sent shivers down their spines. Megan grabbed her notebook instinctively, while Noah reached for his toolkit. Rachel clutched her communicator, though she knew calling for help would be pointless. They were millions of miles from Earth. Liam stood up slowly, his hand resting on the grip of his sidearm. "Stay alert," he said quietly. "Whatever's out there knows we're here." The next morning, the crew of the SS Odyssey woke to find the forest around them unchanged, but the mood was heavier than before. The growl from the night still lingered in their minds, a reminder that they weren't alone on Zoreth 7. As they packed up their equipment to explore further, Megan noticed something new near their camp, a set of footprints leading away from the lake and into the dense woods. "These are fresh," she said, crouching down to examine them. Each print was enormous, with 3 sharp claw marks at the front and a deep indentation where the creature's weight had pressed into the ground. Whatever made these was here recently. Noah groaned. "Great. So we've got a giant monster stalking us now." "Not necessarily stalking," Megan replied, though her voice lacked confidence. "It could just be curious." "Curious enough to eat us?" Rachel asked, gripping her communicator tightly. Before anyone could answer, a rustling sound came from the trees ahead. The group froze, their eyes darting toward the noise. Slowly, a figure emerged. A tall, slender being with translucent skin that shimmered faintly in the sunlight. Its elongated limbs moved gracefully, and its large, almond-shaped eyes studied the humans with equal parts curiosity and caution. Liam stepped forward cautiously, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. "Hello," he said slowly, unsure if the creature would understand. "We're friends." The alien tilted its head, then raised one of its long arms and pointed toward the distant mountains. It repeated a word over and over, "Kaluk." Megan quickly pulled out her translator device, hoping to decipher the meaning. After a few moments, the machine buzzed and displayed a rough translation, "Guardian" or "Protector." She looked at the others. "I think it's trying to warn us about something or someone." Rachel frowned. "Warn us? About Kaluk?" The alien nodded vigorously, its movements almost frantic. Then it mimicked the low growl they had heard the previous night, followed by a gesture of slashing claws across its chest. The message was clear. Kaluk was dangerous. Noah crossed his arms. "Well, that's comforting. Thanks for the heads-up, glowy guy." Despite the warning, Liam felt a sense of relief. At least they were communicating. He tried asking more questions, pointing to himself and saying his name, then gesturing to the alien. After some hesitation, the creature responded with a soft hum and touched its chest. "Xinara," it said. "Xinara," Liam repeated, nodding. "Thank you for talking to us." Xinara didn't smile. Its face remained expressionless, but it seemed to relax slightly. It motioned for them to follow, leading them deeper into the forest. Along the way, it pointed out various plants and animals, making sounds that the translator interpreted as names or warnings. Megan scribbled notes furiously, fascinated by the alien's knowledge of its environment. As they walked, the crew began to notice subtle signs of intelligence all around them. Strange symbols carved into tree trunks, piles of stones arranged in deliberate patterns, even faint traces of what might have been tools. The Vryn, as Xinara referred to its people, were clearly advanced in ways the humans hadn't anticipated. Eventually, Xinara stopped near a clearing where several other Vryn stood waiting. They were taller and thinner than Xinara, their bodies glowing faintly in the dim light. One of them held a staff adorned with feathers and crystals, which it raised high as the group approached. Xinara turned to the humans and spoke again, this time with urgency. "Kaluk, not hunt. Sacred." Megan translated the words aloud. "They're telling us not to hunt Kaluk. It's sacred to them." Liam nodded solemnly. "We'll respect that," he promised, though he wondered how much trouble their earlier discovery of the claw marks and bones might cause. The Vryn exchanged glances, their expressions unreadable. Finally, the one with the staff stepped forward and placed a hand on Xinara's shoulder. With a final glance at the humans, Xinara turned and disappeared into the forest with the others. "Well," Noah said, breaking the silence. "That was weirdly nice of them." "Nice doesn't mean safe," Rachel reminded him, still clutching her communicator. "Let's not forget they're probably watching us right now." Liam agreed. "Stay alert. We're guests here, and we need to act like it." Back at their camp by the lake, The crew of the SS Odyssey gathered around a small table to discuss what they had learned from the Vryn. Megan spread out her notes, her excitement barely contained. Kaluk is clearly important to them, she said, pointing to the sketches she had made of the symbols and patterns the aliens had shown them. It's not just a predator. It's part of their culture. Noah leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. So, what? We're supposed to sit here and wait for this sacred guardian to show up and say hi? Because I'm not feeling super confident about that plan. Rachel shook her head. We can't ignore it. If Kaluk really is as big and dangerous as the Vryn say, we need to know more. For our own safety. Liam nodded, his expression serious. Agreed. But we also can't forget that we're guests on this planet. If the Vryn consider Kaluk sacred, we have to be careful how we approach it. Megan looked up from her notes. What if we track it? Not to hunt it, just to observe. We could set up cameras or traps to get a closer look without actually harming it. Noah raised an eyebrow. Traps? You mean like cages? Because I'm pretty sure a giant apex predator isn't going to appreciate being locked up. Not cages, Megan clarified. More like snares with sensors. Something to slow it down long enough for us to study it. The idea sparked a debate among the group. Rachel worried it might anger the Vryn if they interfered with Kaluk, while Noah argued that studying the creature could provide valuable data for Earth. In the end, Liam decided to go ahead with Megan's plan, but only if they were careful. The next morning, the team set out into the forest, carrying equipment designed to monitor Kaluk without hurting it. Megan led the way, her eyes scanning the ground for tracks or other signs of the creature. The forest was eerily quiet, the usual rustling of leaves replaced by an oppressive stillness. Even the birds seemed to have vanished. After hours of searching, they found what they were looking for, a fresh trail of claw marks leading toward the mountains. The prints were deeper now, as if Kaluk had been moving faster. Megan knelt beside one of the marks, her heart racing. It's close, she whispered. Really close. Noah began setting up the first trap, a net rigged with motion sensors. He worked quickly but carefully, knowing that any mistake could cost them dearly. As he finished, Rachel climbed a nearby tree to install a camera, its lens pointed directly at the trap. Suddenly, a low growl echoed through the trees, deeper and louder than anything they had heard before. The sound sent chills down their spines. Liam signaled for everyone to stay quiet and still. Through the dense foliage, they could see movement, a massive shape shifting between the shadows. Megan grabbed her binoculars and peered through them, her breath catching in her throat. Kaluk was even bigger than she had imagined, its jagged scales glinting in the sunlight. Its glowing eyes scanned the area, alert and intelligent. For a moment, it paused, sniffing the air, then let out another deafening roar before disappearing into the jungle. Noah exhaled sharply. Okay, that thing is terrifying. We got what we came for, Liam said firmly. Let's grab the footage and get back to camp. But as they turned to leave, the ground beneath them trembled. A loud crash came from behind, followed by the snapping of trees. Kaluk was charging straight toward them. Run, Liam shouted. The team sprinted through the forest, their hearts pounding. Behind them, the creature roared again, its massive form smashing through everything in its path. Just as it seemed like they wouldn't make it, the trap sprang to life, tangling Kaluk in the net. It thrashed violently, roaring in fury, but the sensors confirmed it was trapped, for now. Breathing heavily, the crew regrouped at a safe distance. Megan stared at the struggling beast, her mind racing. We did it, she said softly. We caught Kaluk. But Liam's expression remained grim. For how long? He asked, glancing nervously at the horizon. Somewhere out there, the Vryn were watching, and they wouldn't be happy. The crew of the SS Odyssey stood frozen, their eyes fixed on the massive creature tangled in the net. Kaluk thrashed wildly, its jagged scales glinting under the sunlight as it roared in anger. The sound echoed through the forest, shaking the very ground beneath their feet. Megan clutched her tablet, recording every movement, while Noah adjusted the sensors to ensure the trap would hold. "We need to sedate it," Megan said, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and excitement. "If we don't calm it down, it'll tear itself free, or worse." Noah nodded and grabbed a tranquilizer gun from his pack. He hesitated for a moment, eyeing the beast's sharp claws and glowing eyes. "You sure this is a good idea?" he asked, glancing at Liam. Liam frowned but didn't stop him. "Make it quick. We can't risk it breaking loose." Taking a deep breath, Noah stepped closer, aiming carefully at Kalok's thick neck. The creature snapped its jaws, trying to reach him, but the net held firm. With a steady hand, Noah fired the dart. It struck true, sinking into Kalok's hide. For a few tense seconds, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the thrashing began to subside. The roars grew quieter, replaced by heavy, labored breathing. "It's working," Rachel whispered, clutching her communicator tightly. She scanned the area nervously, half expecting the Vryn to appear at any moment. Once Kalok was unconscious, the team moved in cautiously. Megan examined the creature up close, her scientific curiosity overriding her fear. "It's incredible," she murmured, running her fingers over its scaled skin. "Look at these ridges. They're almost like armor." Noah rolled his eyes. "Yeah, great. Can we focus on getting out of here now? I'd rather not stick around when Glowy Gang shows up." Liam agreed. "Let's get it back to camp. We can study it there." He turned to Rachel. "Keep an eye out for the Vryn. If they find us messing with their sacred guardian, things could get ugly." Using ropes and harnesses, the crew managed to secure Kalok and drag it back toward their base. The journey was slow and exhausting, the creature's immense weight making every step a struggle. By the time they reached the lake, sweat soaked their clothes and their muscles ached. As they set up equipment to monitor Kalok, Megan couldn't contain her enthusiasm. "This is a once-in-a-lifetime discovery," she said, attaching electrodes to the creature's body. "We can learn so much about its biology, its behavior, maybe even how it fits into the ecosystem here." Rachel wasn't convinced. "Or maybe we're poking a hornet's nest. What happens if the Vryn decide we've gone too far?" "They warned us," Liam reminded them, pacing nearby. "They told us Kalok was sacred. We need to figure out how to handle this without crossing a line." But as the hours passed, the crew began to relax. Kalok remained unconscious, its vital signs stable. Megan worked tirelessly, collecting samples and documenting everything she observed. Noah tinkered with the sensors, ensuring they wouldn't fail. Even Rachel joined in, helping Megan analyze the data. That night, as they sat around a small fire, the mood shifted. The initial fear had faded, replaced by a sense of accomplishment. "We did it," Megan said proudly. "We captured the apex predator of Zoreth 7. This could change everything we know about alien ecosystems." Noah smirked. "Yeah, or it could get us killed. Either way, pretty exciting." Liam stared into the flames, his mind elsewhere. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Every rustle of leaves or splash in the lake made him glance over his shoulder. The Vryn hadn't shown themselves yet, but he knew they were out there. Unbeknownst to the crew, they were right. Hidden among the trees, several pairs of glowing eyes observed silently. The Vryn had seen everything. The capture, the tests, the humans' disregard for their warnings. Chinera stood at the edge of the forest, her expression unreadable. Beside her, another Vryn raised a staff, its crystals pulsing faintly with energy. "They disrespect Kalok." The Vryn beside her whispered. "What do we do?" Chinera's gaze hardened. "We wait," she said softly. "For now." And with that, the aliens melted back into the shadows, leaving the humans unaware of the storm brewing just beyond their camp. The next morning, the crew of the SS Odyssey woke to find Kalok still unconscious, but showing signs of stirring. Megan was the first to notice, her excitement bubbling over as she checked the creature's vitals. "It's recovering faster than I expected," she said, adjusting the electrodes attached to its scaly skin. "We need to decide what we're going to do once it wakes up." Noah groaned, already dreading the answer. "Please don't say, keep studying it. That thing could tear us apart if it gets loose." "We can't just let it go," Megan argued, her voice firm. "Not after all this effort. Besides, think about the data we'll lose." Rachel chimed in, her tone cautious. "What about the Vryn? They made it clear Kellogg is important to them. If they see us holding it captive, they might not be so friendly anymore." Liam nodded, his expression grim. "She's right. We've pushed our luck as far as it'll go. Maybe it's time to cut our losses and release it." Megan frowned, but didn't argue further. Instead, she focused on gathering as much information as possible before they had to act. She took more samples, documented every detail of Kellogg's anatomy, and ran scans to analyze its internal structure. The others helped where they could, though Noah spent most of his time reinforcing the net, just in case. As the day wore on, Kellogg began to stir. Its massive body shifted slightly, and a low growl rumbled in its throat. The sound sent a chill through the group, reminding them of the danger they were in. Liam stepped forward, his hand resting on the grip of his sidearm. "Everyone stay alert. If it breaks free, we need to be ready." But Kellogg didn't break free. Instead, it opened its glowing eyes, staring directly at the humans surrounding it. For a long moment, no one moved. The creature's gaze was piercing, almost intelligent, as if it understood exactly what was happening. Then, without warning, it let out a deafening roar, thrashing violently against the ropes. The ground shook, and the crew scrambled back, shouting in panic. Megan tripped over her equipment, while Noah grabbed a tranquilizer gun, aiming shakily at the beast. "Don't shoot," Liam barked, raising his hands in a calming gesture. "We don't want to hurt it." Kellogg's movements slowed, though it continued to glare at them with obvious anger. Finally, it stopped struggling altogether, lying still on the ground. Whether it was too tired to fight or simply waiting for an opening, no one could tell. Rachel broke the silence, her voice trembling. "This isn't safe. Not for us, and definitely not for it. Let's sedate it again and figure out how to release it." Reluctantly, Megan agreed. "Fine, but give me 10 more minutes to finish collecting data." While Megan worked, Liam called a quick meeting with the others. "We've overstayed our welcome here," he said quietly. "Once we're done, we'll release Kellogg and pack up camp. It's time to leave Zoreth 7. Noah sighed in relief. "Finally, I was starting to think we'd end up as alien snacks." But Rachel wasn't convinced their problems were over. "What about the Vryn? Even if we let Kellogg go, they saw what we did. Do you really think they'll forgive us?" Liam hesitated. He didn't have an answer. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the team prepared to release Kellogg. They carried the sedated creature to the edge of the forest, laying it gently on the mossy ground. Megan lingered the longest, her face a mix of regret and determination. "I hope you survive this," she whispered, brushing a hand over its rough scales. As they retreated to a safe distance, the Vryn emerged from the shadows. Sinara led the group, her staff glowing faintly in the twilight. Without a word, she approached Kellogg, placing a hand on its side. The creature stirred, waking slowly under her touch. The humans watched silently, unsure what would happen next. When Kellogg finally rose to its feet, it turned to look at them one last time before disappearing into the forest with the Vryn. Though the immediate danger had passed, Liam couldn't shake the feeling that their actions would have consequences, ones they weren't prepared to face. The crew of the SS Odyssey stood in silence as Kellogg vanished into the forest with the Vryn. The air felt heavier now, charged with an unspoken tension. Megan hugged her arms tightly, her earlier excitement replaced by guilt. "Do you think they'll forgive us?" she asked softly, glancing at Liam. Liam didn't answer right away. His eyes were fixed on the spot where Kellogg had disappeared, his jaw clenched. Finally, he shook his head. I don't know, but we crossed a line today. They warned us not to interfere with Kaluk, and we ignored them. Noah kicked at the ground, scuffing his boot against the moss. What's done is done. We can't change it now. Let's just pack up and get out of here before things get worse. Rachel nodded, though her hands trembled as she adjusted her communicator. He's right. The longer we stay, the more trouble we're asking for. Despite their shared unease, the group began dismantling their camp. Megan worked quickly, packing away her equipment while avoiding eye contact with the others. She couldn't stop thinking about the look in Kaluk's eyes when it woke up. Angry, confused, but also hurt. It wasn't just an animal. It was intelligent, capable of understanding what had been done to it. As night fell, the crew gathered around a small fire, their movements slow and deliberate. No one spoke much, each lost in their own thoughts. The usual banter and jokes that kept morale high were absent, replaced by a somber quiet. Then Noah broke the silence. You know, he said, poking at the fire with a stick. We might have dodged a bullet back there. Releasing Kaluk could buy us some goodwill with the Vryn. Or it could make them even angrier, Rachel countered, hugging her knees to her chest. We still messed with something sacred to them. That's not something people, or aliens, just forget. Megan looked down at her hands, twisting them nervously. Maybe we should have left sooner, before we caught Kaluk. Maybe none of this would have happened if we'd listened to them from the start. Liam sighed, rubbing his temples. Second-guessing won't help us now. What matters is getting off this planet safely and making sure we learn from this. Humanity has a bad habit of stepping on things we don't understand. Before anyone could respond, a low hum filled the air. It started faintly, almost like the wind, but grew louder and more distinct. The crew froze, exchanging worried glances. The sound was coming from the direction of the forest. Is that Kaluk? Rachel whispered, gripping her communicator tightly. I don't think so, Liam said, standing up slowly. He squinted into the darkness, trying to see past the tree line. The hum turned into a rhythmic pulsing, accompanied by soft glowing lights moving steadily toward them. It's the Vryn, Megan realized, her voice barely above a whisper. Sure enough, several figures emerged from the shadows, their translucent skin shimmering faintly in the moonlight. Sinara led the group, her staff held high, its crystals casting eerie beams of light across the clearing. The crew instinctively backed away, unsure what to expect. Shinera stopped a few feet away, her expression unreadable. One of the other Vryn stepped forward, holding a bundle wrapped in leaves. They placed it gently on the ground, then retreated without a word. What is that? Noah asked, eyeing the bundle suspiciously. Shinera tilted her head, studying the humans carefully. Then she spoke, her voice calm but firm. Gift. For balance. Megan hesitated, then knelt beside the bundle and unwrapped it. Inside were chunks of meat, dark and glistening in the firelight. The smell was rich and savory, unlike anything they'd ever encountered. They're giving us food, Rachel asked, bewildered. Liam frowned. Why? Megan glanced at Sinara, who simply watched them with steady eyes. Maybe it's a gesture of peace, Megan suggested, or maybe they want us to understand something. Noah picked up a piece of the meat, sniffing it cautiously. Well, I'm starving, and if they wanted to poison us, they could have done it already. Against Liam's protests, Noah took a bite. His eyes widened in surprise. Wow, this is amazing. One by one, the others followed suit, their hunger outweighing their caution. As they ate, the Vryn remained silent, watching them intently. When the meal was finished, Sinera raised her staff once more, signaling her group to leave. As the aliens disappeared into the forest, Liam turned to the others. That was strange and kind of unsettling. Rachel nodded, staring at the empty bundle. They gave us Kaluk's flesh. Do you think they meant it as forgiveness, or punishment? No one had an answer, but the weight of the gesture hung over them like a storm cloud. Whatever the Vryn intended, one thing was clear. Humanity's presence on Zoreth 7 had consequences far beyond what they could imagine. The fire crackled softly as the crew of the SS Odyssey sat in uneasy silence. The taste of the meat lingered on their tongues, rich and strangely satisfying, but none of them felt truly at ease. Megan stared into the flames, her mind racing with questions. Why would they give us Kaluk's flesh? She asked quietly, breaking the quiet that had settled over the group. Noah shrugged, leaning back against a tree trunk. Maybe they wanted to share their culture with us, or maybe it's some kind of test. Rachel frowned, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. A test for what? To see if we'd eat it, because we did. Liam paced nearby, his boots crunching softly on the mossy ground. He stopped abruptly, turning to face the others. I don't think it was about the eating. It was about respect, or lack of it. We captured Kaluk, ignored the Vryn's warnings, and now they've given us a piece of their sacred guardian. They're making a point. Megan nodded slowly. You're probably right. But what does that mean for us? Are they forgiving us? Punishing us? Before anyone could answer, Noah let out a nervous laugh. Or maybe they just wanted to feed us. That meat was incredible. I haven't tasted anything like it before. Rachel shot him a glare. This isn't funny, Noah. We're talking about something sacred to them. Something alive. And now we've eaten it. Noah held up his hands defensively. Hey, I'm just saying, it's not every day you get to try alien cuisine. Besides, they didn't seem mad when they left. They didn't seem happy either, Liam muttered, glancing toward the forest. The shadows seemed darker now, heavier, as though the trees themselves were watching. He couldn't shake the feeling that the Vryn weren't done with them yet. As the night wore on, the crew prepared to turn in, though no one expected sleep to come easily. Megan volunteered for the first watch, claiming she wasn't tired, but everyone knew she just wanted time alone to think. Sitting by the dying embers of the fire, she pulled out her notebook and began sketching Kaluk from memory. Its glowing eyes haunted her thoughts, and she wondered what it must have felt like to be hunted, captured, and ultimately consumed. Hours later, Rachel woke to relieve Megan. The biologist handed over the communicator without a word, her expression troubled. Rachel took her place by the fire, staring into the flickering light. She tried to focus on the sounds of the forest, the rustling leaves, the distant hum of insects, but her mind kept returning to the meal they had shared. Suddenly, a low growl echoed through the trees. Rachel froze, her heart pounding. The sound was faint but unmistakable, sending a shiver down her spine. She reached for her communicator, ready to wake the others, when a pair of glowing eyes appeared in the darkness. It wasn't Kaluk this time. Instead, a lone Vryn stepped forward, its translucent skin shimmering faintly in the moonlight. It carried no weapon, only a small pouch slung over its shoulder. Rachel recognized it as one of the aliens who had accompanied Xynera earlier. "Who's there?" Rachel called out, her voice trembling. Behind her, the rest of the crew stirred, waking quickly at the sound of her voice. The Vryn raised a hand in a gesture of peace, then knelt and placed the pouch on the ground. Without a word, it backed away, disappearing into the shadows as silently as it had come. Liam grabbed a flashlight and approached the pouch cautiously. Inside, he found more pieces of the same dark, glistening meat. A note written in broken English lay beside it. Respect or regret. Noah groaned, running a hand through his hair. Great. So they're still mad. Megan shook her head, her face pale. Not mad. Testing us. They want to see if we'll take more, even though we know what it means. Liam clenched his fists, frustration bubbling beneath the surface. We can't keep playing games with them. We need to leave. Now. But Rachel hesitated, staring at the pouch. What if leaving isn't enough? What if they expect us to make amends? The group fell silent, the weight of the situation pressing down on them. Whatever choice they made next, it was clear the Vryn weren't going to let them forget what they had done. And neither would Kellogg's memory. The crew of the SS Odyssey gathered around the pouch left by the Vryn, their faces tense and uncertain. The air felt heavier than ever, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. Liam picked up the note again, reading the words aloud. Respect or regret. His voice was low, but it carried a sharp edge of frustration. What does that even mean? Noah asked, pacing back and forth. Are they saying we have to eat this stuff again, or what? Megan shook her head, her eyes fixed on the pouch. I think it's bigger than that. They're giving us a choice, to show respect for Kaluk or to ignore it, and face the consequences. Rachel frowned, clutching her communicator tightly. But how do we show respect? We've already messed up so much. Is eating this meat supposed to fix things? Liam sighed, rubbing his temples. It's not about fixing anything. It's about acknowledging what we did. If we take this meat, we're accepting their way of life, and maybe earning their forgiveness. But if we refuse, they'll see it as another insult. Megan finished for him, her voice barely above a whisper. She glanced at the others, her expression conflicted. We can't just leave it here. That would make things worse. Noah groaned, throwing up his hands. So we're really doing this, eating more of their sacred predator. This keeps getting weirder. Reluctantly, the group agreed to accept the gift. Each person took a small piece of the meat, chewing slowly despite the unease twisting in their stomachs. The taste was as rich and savory as before, but this time it left a bitter aftertaste, not from the food, but from guilt. When they were done, Liam carefully placed the empty pouch back where the Vryn had left it. Let's hope this is enough, he muttered, glancing toward the trees. The shadows seemed darker now, almost alive, and every rustle of leaves made him flinch. The next morning, the crew worked quickly to pack up their camp. The sooner they left Zoreth 7, the better. As they loaded the last of their equipment onto the ship, Megan paused to look back at the forest one final time. Do you think they'll forgive us? She asked softly. Noah shrugged, avoiding her gaze. Doesn't matter now. We're leaving. But Rachel wasn't so sure. They might not forget. Not something like this. As the SS Odyssey prepared for takeoff, the engines roared to life, shaking the ground beneath them. Through the viewport, the crew watched as several Vryn emerged from the forest, standing silently near the lake. Xynara was among them, her staff glowing faintly in the sunlight. She didn't move or speak, but her presence was unmistakable, a silent reminder of the line humanity had crossed. Once the ship was airborne, the tension eased slightly, though no one spoke much. Megan stared out the window, her mind replaying everything that had happened. Do you think we'll ever come back here? She asked after a long silence. Liam shook his head firmly. Not if I have anything to say about it. We've caused enough trouble. Noah leaned back in his seat, letting out a long sigh. Well, at least we got some good data out of it. Right. Megan shot him a glare, but said nothing. Even Rachel looked away, guilt etched across her face. Hours later, as the planet faded into the distance, the crew began to relax. They were safe, for now. But deep down, none of them could shake the feeling that their actions had consequences far beyond what they understood. That night, as they drifted through space, Liam stood alone in the cockpit, staring at the stars. He replayed the events on Zoreth 7 over and over in his mind, wondering if they'd made the right choices. Suddenly, the ship's sensors beeped, detecting an anomaly nearby. A faint shimmer appeared on the monitor, something following them. What is that? Rachel asked, appearing behind him. Liam frowned, adjusting the controls. I don't know, but whatever it is, it's fast. The shimmer grew brighter, pulsing with energy. Then, without warning, it vanished, leaving only static on the screen. Was that the Vryn? Megan whispered, joining them. No one answered. They didn't need to. The message was clear. Humanity's presence on Zoreth 7 hadn't gone unnoticed, and it wouldn't be forgotten anytime soon. The crew of the SS Odyssey stared at the monitors in silence, their unease growing with each passing second. The shimmer that had followed them was gone now, leaving only static on the screen. But none of them believed it was truly over. The feeling of being watched lingered, heavier than before. "What do we do now?" Rachel asked, her voice trembling. She clutched her communicator tightly, as if it could somehow protect her from whatever was out there. Liam frowned, his hands moving quickly over the controls. "We keep moving. Whatever that thing was, it's fast. But so are we. Let's put some distance between us and it." Noah leaned forward, squinting at the monitor. "You really think it's the Vryn? Because if they've got tech like that, we're in serious trouble." Megan shook her head, though she didn't look convinced. "I don't know. It could be something else, something we didn't see on the planet. Or it could be Kaluk," Rachel muttered under her breath. Her words hung in the air, unspoken fears taking shape in everyone's minds. Liam turned to face the group, his expression grim. "Speculating won't help us. We need to focus on getting back to Earth. Noah, check the engines. Make sure we're running at full capacity. Megan, monitor the sensors for any signs of movement. Rachel, stay on communications. If anything happens, I want to know immediately." The team nodded and scattered to their stations, working quickly but quietly. The tension in the air was thick, pressing down on all of them. Even Noah, usually the most laid-back member of the crew, moved with a sense of urgency he rarely showed. As the hours passed, the ship drifted further into space, putting Zoreth 7 far behind them. For a while, it seemed like they might have escaped whatever had been following them. The sensors remained clear, and the hum of the engines was steady and reassuring. But then, without warning, the lights flickered. A low hum filled the ship, vibrating through the walls and floor. Megan rushed to the main console, her fingers flying over the keys. "Something's interfering with our systems," she said, her voice tight with panic. "It's like an energy field. Can you shut it down?" Liam asked, gripping the edge of the console. "I'm trying," Megan snapped, her eyes glued to the screen. "But it's not responding. It's coming from outside the ship." Before anyone could react, the hum grew louder, almost deafening. The ship shuddered violently, throwing everyone off balance. Alarms blared, filling the cabin with flashing red lights. "We're losing power," Noah shouted from the engine room. "I can't stabilize it." Rachel grabbed her communicator, frantically scanning frequencies for any sign of contact. Nothing. There's no signal. Liam clenched his fists, forcing himself to stay calm. "Everyone hold on. We need to figure this out before." His words were cut off as the ship jolted again, sending them sprawling. Through the viewport, a massive shape materialized, a glowing, translucent form that pulsed with energy. It wasn't solid, but its presence was undeniable. "The Vryn," Megan whispered, her face pale. "They found us." The form hovered silently, its edges shimmering like liquid light. Then, without warning, it surged forward, enveloping the ship in a wave of energy. The crew screamed as the lights went out completely, plunging them into darkness. When the power returned moments later, the ship was eerily quiet. The alarms had stopped, and the hum was gone. Slowly, the crew climbed to their feet, their faces etched with confusion and fear. "What just happened?" Noah asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Liam shook his head, staring out the viewport. The glowing form was gone, leaving only empty space behind. But on the dashboard, a single message blinked on the screen: respect or regret. "They gave us a choice," Megan said softly, her hands trembling. "And I think we just made the wrong one." No one spoke. The weight of their actions, and the consequences, settled over them like a heavy blanket. Whatever the Vryn had done, It was clear they weren't going to let humanity forget what had happened on Zoreth 7. And as the SS Odyssey drifted onward, the crew couldn't shake the feeling that they were still being watched. The SS Odyssey floated silently in the vast emptiness of space, its systems functioning again, but carrying an unsettling quiet. The crew sat together in the main cabin, their faces pale and drawn. None of them spoke, each lost in their own thoughts as they replayed the events of the past few days. "It's not over," Rachel finally said, breaking the silence. Her voice was soft, but carried a tremor of fear. "They're still out there, watching." Liam nodded slowly, his jaw tight. "Yeah, and we brought this on ourselves." Megan stared down at her hands, guilt weighing heavily on her chest. "We thought we were explorers, scientists looking for answers. But all we did was take what didn't belong to us. We disrespected their world." Noah sighed, leaning back against the wall. "Well, hindsight's perfect, right? What's done is done. Now we just have to deal with it." "Deal with it?" Rachel snapped, her voice rising. "How do you deal with something like that? We ate their sacred creature, ignored their warnings, and acted like we owned the place. You think saying sorry will fix it?" Noah held up his hands defensively. "Hey, I'm not saying it'll fix anything. I'm just saying we can't change the past. All we can do is move forward." Liam stood up, pacing slowly across the cabin. "Moving forward means learning from this. Humanity has a bad habit of stepping into places we don't understand and leaving chaos behind. If we go back to Earth without thinking about what happened here, we're no better than the people who sent us." Megan looked up, her eyes filled with determination. "Then let's make sure someone listens. When we get home, we tell the truth. Everything. About Kalok, the Vryn, and what we did wrong. Maybe then we can stop others from making the same mistakes." Rachel hesitated, glancing toward the viewport where the stars stretched endlessly. "Do you really think anyone will care? Governments and corporations, they only see resources and profit. They won't listen to us." "They might not," Liam admitted, stopping his pacing. "But if even one person hears our story and thinks twice before stepping onto another planet, it'll be worth it." For a moment, the cabin fell silent again, the weight of their decision hanging in the air. Then Noah spoke, his usual sarcasm replaced by something quieter. "So, what now? Just sit here and wait until we reach Earth?" "No," Liam said firmly. "Now we prepare. Document everything. The footage, the samples, everything we learned. When we get back, we'll share it all. And hope it's enough." As the hours passed, the crew worked together, compiling data and writing reports. Megan focused intently on her notes, determined to leave nothing out. Rachel monitored communications, though the silence outside remained unbroken. Noah checked the engines one last time, ensuring the ship would hold together until they reached home. Through the viewport, the stars shimmered faintly, indifferent to the turmoil aboard the small human vessel. But deep down, the crew couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't truly alone. Somewhere out there, beyond the edges of their vision, the Vryn, or perhaps Kalok itself, was still watching. Days later, as Earth came into view, the crew gathered in the cockpit, staring at the blue-green planet growing larger on the screen. Relief washed over them, but it was tinged with unease. They had survived, but the cost of their journey weighed heavily on their shoulders. "We'll do better next time," Megan whispered, almost to herself. "We have to." Liam placed a hand on her shoulder, offering a small, tired smile. "We will. For now, let's focus on telling the truth." As the SS Odyssey descended through Earth's atmosphere, none of them noticed the faint shimmer trailing behind them, a silent promise that the choices they made on Zoreth 7 would echo far beyond their understanding. The universe had taken notice, and humanity would soon learn that respect wasn't optional, it was survival.